regretfully, but unsurprisingly. Russia has repeatedly blocked the Security Council from taking action on these issues. So we're going to keep pressing the Security Council to help improve the delivery of humanitarian aid to those who are in such desperate need, and to ensure accountability. Including continuing to monitor any potential use of chemical weapons in Syria. And we're going to work in the UN General Assembly as well. Both on accountability and to advance a political settlement. Because it should be clear that although you may achieve tactical victories, over the long term the Assad regime cannot slaughter its way to legitimacy. That's why we'll continue to press for a transition to a more representative government. And that's why the world must not avert our eyes to the terrible events that are unfolding. The Syrian regime and its Russian and Iranian allies are trying to obfuscate the truth. The world should not be fooled. And the world will not forget. So even in a season where the incredible blessings that we know as Americans are all around us, even as we enjoy family and friends and are reminded of how lucky we are, we should also be reminded that to be an American involves bearing burdens and meeting obligations to others. American values and American ideals are what will lead the way to a safer and more prosperous 2017, both here and abroad. And by the way, few embody those values and ideals like our brave men and women in uniform and their families. So I just want to close by wishing all of them a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. With that, I will take some questions. And I'm going to start with Josh Laterman, of AP. Question, thank you, MR. President. There's a perception that you're letting President Putin get away with interfering in the US election. And that a response that nobody knows about or a look-back review just won't cut it. Are you prepared to call out President Putin by name for ordering this hacking? And do you agree with what Hillary Clinton now says? That the hacking was actually partly responsible for her loss? And is your administration's open quarreling with Trump and his team on? This issue tarnishing the smooth transition of power that you have promised? President Obama, well, first of all, with respect to the transition. I think they would be the first to acknowledge that we have done everything we can to make sure that they are successful as I promised. And that will continue. And it's just been a few days since I last. Talked to the president-elect about a whole range of transition issues. That cooperation is going to continue. There hasn't been a lot of squabbling. What we've simply said is the facts, which are that, based on uniform intelligence assessments. The Russians were responsible for hacking the DNC, and that, as a consequence, it is important for us to review all elements. Of that and make sure that we are preventing that kind of interference through cyber attacks in the future. That should be a bipartisan issue, that shouldn't be a partisan issue. and my hope is that the president-elect is going to similarly be concerned with making sure that we don't have potential foreign influence in our election process. I don't think any American wants that. And that shouldn't be a source of an argument. I think that part of the challenge is that it gets caught up in the carryover from election season. And I think it is very important for us to distinguish between the politics of the election and the need for us. As a country, both from a national security perspective but also in terms of the integrity of our election system and our democracy, to make sure that we don't create a political football here. Now, with respect to how this thing unfolded last year, let's just go through the facts pretty quickly. At the beginning of the summer, we're alerted to the possibility that the DNC has been hacked. And I immediately order law enforcement as well as our intelligence teams to find out everything about it. Investigate it thoroughly, to brief the potential victims of this hacking. To brief on a bipartisan basis the leaders of both the House and the Senate and the relevant intelligence committees. And once we had clarity and certainty around what, in fact, had happened, we publicly announced that, in fact, Russia had hacked into the DNC. And at that time, we did not attribute motives or any interpretations of why they had done so. We didn't discuss what the effects of it might be. We simply let people know, the public know. Just as we had let members of Congress know that this had happened. And as a consequence, all of you wrote a lot of stories about both what had happened And then you interpreted why that might have happened and what effect it was going to have on the election outcomes. We did not. And the reason we did not was because in this hyper-partisan atmosphere, at a time when my primary concern was making sure that the integrity of the election process was not in any way damaged. At a time when anything that was said by me or anybody in the White House would immediately be seen through a partisan lens. I wanted to make sure that everybody understood we were playing this thing straight, that we weren't trying to advantage one side or another. But what we were trying to do was let people know that this had taken place. And so if you started seeing effects on the election, if you were trying to measure why this was happening and how you should consume the information that was being leaked, that you might want to take this into account. And that's exactly how we should have handled it. Imagine if we had done the opposite. It would have become immediately just one more political scrum. And part of the goal here was to make sure that we did not do the work of the leakers for them by raising more. And more questions about the integrity of the election right before the election was taking place at a time. By the way, when the president-elect himself was raising questions about the integrity of the election, and, finally, I think it's worth pointing out that the information was already out. It was in the hands of WikiLeaks, so that was going to come out no matter what. What I was concerned about, in particular, was making sure that that wasn't compounded by potential hacking that could hamper vote counting, affect the actual election process itself. And so in early September, when I saw President Putin in China, I felt that the most effective way to ensure that that didn't happen was to talk to him directly and tell him to cut it out. And there were going to be some serious consequences if he didn't. And, in fact, we did not see further tampering of the election process. But the leaks through WikiLeaks had already occurred. So when I look back in terms of how we handled it, I think we handled it the way it should have been handled. We allowed law enforcement and the intelligence community to do its job without political influence. We briefed all relevant parties involved in terms of what was taking place. When we had a consensus around what had happened, we announced it not through the White House. Not through me, but rather through the intelligence communities that had actually carried out these investigations. And then we allowed you and the American public to make an assessment as to how to weigh that going into the election. And the truth is that there was nobody here who didn't have some sense of what kind of effect. It might have. I'm finding it a little curious that everybody is suddenly acting surprised that this looked like it was disadvantaging Hillary Clinton because you guys wrote about it every day. Every single leak. About every little juicy tidbit of political gossip, including John Podesta's risotto recipe. This was an obsession that dominated the news coverage. So I do think it's worth us reflecting how it is that a presidential election of such importance of such moment, with so many big issues at stake and such a contrast between the candidates. came to be dominated by a bunch of these leaks. What is it about our political system that made us vulnerable to these kinds of potential manipulations which, as I've said publicly before, were not particularly sophisticated? This was not some elaborate, complicated espionage scheme. They hacked into some Democratic Party emails that contained pretty routine stuff, some of it embarrassing or uncomfortable. Because I suspect that if any of us got our emails hacked into, there might be some things that we wouldn't want suddenly appearing on the front page of a newspaper or a telecast. Even if there wasn't anything particularly illegal or controversial about it. And then it just took off. And that concerns me. And it should concern all of us. But the truth of the matter is, that everybody had the information. It was out there. And we handled it the way we should have. Now, moving forward, I think there are a couple of issues that this raises. Number one is just the constant challenge that we are going to have. With cybersecurity throughout our economy and throughout our society. We are a digitalized culture, and there is hacking going on every single day. There's not a company, there's not a major organization, there's not a financial institution. There's not a branch of our government where somebody is not going to be fishing for something or trying to penetrate, or put in a virus or malware. And this is why for the last 8 years, I've been obsessed with how do we continually upgrade our cybersecurity systems.